Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of India's World with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. For the first time, India will host the annual G20 summit in 2022, coinciding with the country's 75th anniversary of independence. Prime Minister Narendra Modi made the announcement at the closing ceremony of the 13th G20 summit in the Argentinian capital on Saturday. He thanked Italy for allowing India to play the host. Italy was to host the International Forum of the world's top 20 economies in 2022. The 14th edition will be held in Japan, while Saudi Arabia will host the 15th. Meanwhile, on Friday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in the first trilateral meeting with his Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe and United States President Donald Trump at the sidelines of the G20 summit in the capital, Buenos Aires. The second Russia-India-China RIC trilateral summit also took place in the Argentinian capital after a gap of 12 years. In a meeting characterized by warmth and positivity, the leaders discussed cooperation and coordination in various areas which could contribute to global peace and stability. On this edition of India's World, we will analyze the takeaways for India from the recently concluded 13th G20 summit. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajanhar, former ambassador, and Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation. Thank you to the both of you for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, let's first, break up the G20 summit because there are various aspects that we would like to speak about. Let's first talk about J, that is Japan, America, and India, and the takeaways really for you.
I think it was the first meeting between the three leaders, historic, and I think particularly as it was mentioned by President Trump, it was also mentioned by Prime Minister Modi, that currently India's relations with America and with Japan are the best that they have ever been. And this was repeated by President Trump, who said that America's relations with India and Japan are the best that they have ever been. And of course, all the three countries are democracies. So in that sense, in terms of values, they are on the same page. But I think what it really brings them together at the moment is a convergence of interests. And the most important interest, not only in terms of trade, economy, investment, etc., is ensuring security, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific, as we know, is a new term. Of course, it was a term that was initially used by Shinzo Abe when he had come to India in 2007. But then after that, it didn't really get taken up. But it has started receiving all this much of traction when Donald Trump came to Asia last year, and he started using the term Indo-Pacific to give a sense that both Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean are in that sense integrated with each other, and also giving greater importance to India in terms of whatever architecture, economic, political, security architecture that emerges. And of course, we have seen over the last few years the manner in which China has been expanding its influence and its dominance, its assertiveness and expansionism, particularly in the South China Sea.
Right.
We have seen its 9-9, the fact that Philippines took it to the court, to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The decision came from there in July. China did not pay any heed to it. It continues to occupy more islands in the South China Sea. It continues to militarize them. It continues to create new islands in that region. So, and all this it has been able to do without facing any opposition whatsoever from any of the countries, America, Japan, or the ASEAN. So I think this has brought the three countries together, and that is why the most important element that emerged out of this was to ensure a free, open, inclusive and rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific.
Absolutely.
2 points that Prime Minister Modi made, I think those are very, very relevant. And I think on that there was agreement amongst all of them. Number one, what he said was we should ensure that this continues to be inclusive. So we should reach out to all the countries in the region and explain to them what are the benefits that are going to accrue to them, because some of these countries might get the impression that this is a grouping that is getting together to sort of confront China. And that is not the impression that we want to give, that India wants to give. And India wants to say that, whichever other countries are willing, they should also come, and basically focus would be more on economics, on infrastructure development, on investments, etc. The second point that he made was that, and it was repeated, was that ASEAN would continue to be central to whatever architecture evolves in that region.
Right.
So in that sense, I think Jai, which Prime Minister Modi said denotes success, is a historic, number one, because it is the first time it has taken place. Number two, leaders have said that it is not a one-off event, not a one-off meeting. And it should be repeated whenever the leaders are on the sidelines of G20 or other such meetings. They should meet and have a trilateral sort of a discussion to see how stability, security in the region and in the world can be promoted.
Absolutely. Captain Bansal, what is the potential of the grouping really going forward?
See, the potential is enormous. Firstly, as Ambassador Sajjan Har said, that three democracies with common interests coming together. But to my mind, I have a question. See, we already had Quad and the fourth member was also present. So why only three countries got together? That's a question that actually readily comes to mind. Was Australia not willing to be seen with the three other countries? Or it was a conscious decision that Australia should not be included? Because when we look at Indo-Pacific and we are looking at Indo-Pacific, all four countries were relevant. We are talking of Quad. So that's one issue which I have not been able to understand. Maybe probably it was felt that this grouping was seen as anti-China at this point of time and probably Australia did not wish to come. But what is good is that this statement that this is not a one-off event, this will continue, is very, very important because all these three countries share common values. And I think this we will go forward. And what is even important is that we did not confine ourselves to this Jai grouping alone. We also revived RIC, which we had not participated for last 12 years. The three Asian giants got together, Eurasian giants I would put it rather, that would be even more better, got together and resolved our problems which had been lingering. What is important is that Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping also agreed that ever since their Wuhan summit, this relationship between the two countries had improved considerably. And then of course, Prime Minister Modi made numerous statements, comments, etc., which were very important. And I think one of the key focus areas was his 9-point agenda of looking at economic offenders who have actually fugitives who have actually run away, especially because in India, as you know, there have been a lot of hue and cry about some of them who have high profile fugitives who have actually run away from law after duping investors, small investors as well as banks of thousands of crores and are floating around. I think the points which he raised as far as these economic fugitives are concerned are, I think, significant. And I think if G20 adopts these points, this will be a very, very significant achievement from India's point of view. Of course, the very fact that we could juggle around with the order in which the G20 summits were to be held so as to ensure that we host the first ever G20 summit along with our 75th anniversary itself shows that India's clout is growing amongst the Committee of Nations, because we need to understand that G20 countries actually contribute to 90% of global production.
Right.
And they not only have 2/3 of course, world's population, but also 80% of global trade. So it's a very, very significant grouping, virtually de facto world. So
Absolutely.
to that sort of a grouping, if we have managed to change the order to suit our requirements, I think that is very, very significant, because it's not very far back that India and Italy were having a lot of serious problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ambassador, I'm going to come back to India hosting the G20 summit in 2022. Of course, that's a major development, a significant development. I'd like you to speak about that as well. But coming back to Jai first, the fact that the three heads of state, I mean, the level at which this meeting or this trilateral has taken place is significant in itself, isn't it?
It is very significant. And let me respond to the question that you had put, and you know what Alok has also mentioned. I think it is not that Australia might have wanted to stay out of it. I think Australia would have very much liked to come on board here, because as we know also in the Malabar exercises, Australia has been wanting, but we have had our reservations, so we have not allowed them. So now the Malabar exercises take place between the United States, India and Japan. You know, India is very, I think we have a very clear vision and a very clear view. We do not want Quad and Indo-Pacific to be confused with each other. If you look at the Shangri-La Dialogue statement by the Prime Minister, he spoke about the Indo-Pacific, and he said it is a geographical construct. It is not a strategic construct. And he said for us, this moves from the eastern coast of Africa to the western coast of America. You know, there might be other definitions. What Mattis, who was there, the defense secretary, he said it moves from, for them, it moves from Bollywood to Hollywood. So, you know, we want to keep Indo-Pacific very, very clear. He did not refer to Quad at all. And because you see, Quad has that connotation that it is, these are countries which are opposed to China, which are getting together. We are not willing to give that sort of message or be provocative. You would recall that in the third meeting of the Quad, which took place in Singapore now, or even in the second meeting of the Quad, which took place again in Singapore in February, there was a move, because at the moment they are meeting at junior official levels, at the level of joint secretaries. There was a move by some countries to raise it to senior official level, vice minister, foreign secretary. India was the country which put its foot down and he said, no, we want it at that junior level. And so here, if the Quad had met at the head of state and head of government level, the sort of message that you're sending is very, very different and very alarming, and for the countries that take this message. And I don't think we are ready, we are prepared to send that sort of a message, because you know, as has been mentioned, Prime Minister Modi had a bilateral meeting with Xi Jinping. It was the fourth meeting this year. He also had an RIC meeting where three leaders were there, Putin, Xi and Prime Minister Modi. He also had a BRICS meeting. So, you know, in just a matter of 48 hours, he met the Chinese president thrice on 3 occasions in different fora. So I don't think it is in our interest, after all, the sort of relations that we have to manage with China, none of the other countries has to manage. We have a disputed 4,000 kilometer long border. We have the China-Pakistan economic corridor. I don't want to dwell on those things. I think those are very well known. But the point is that India wants to have good relations with JAI. It wants to have good relations with these countries. It is able to balance these relations. It is able to straddle effortlessly and seamlessly across these different. And the final point is that all these countries, because of India's increasing clout and increasing profile, not only economically but also politically and strategically, all these countries want India to be on board with them.
Absolutely. Talking about RIC, you did touch upon it, Captain Balsan, in your opening remarks. As far as RIC is concerned, meeting after 12 years, you know, 12 years ago, we suggested that there could be tremendous potential as far as this grouping is concerned. Happy that they are meeting once again at the table?
Undoubtedly. To my mind, I think this sort of a communication should continue. In recent past, we have seen that Prime Minister Modi and President Xi have met, in fact, according to media reports, 4 times this year itself. So I think we share a good chemistry with Chinese leader, and it's even better if we actually meet them trilaterally, because when you are meeting bilaterally, because of historical reasons, there are certain expectations which may not always be fulfilled when there is a bilateral meeting. So to my mind, I think a trilateral meeting, a Eurasian centric approach, because we are also, all 3 countries are now also part of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is essential. And I think this sort of a trilateral meeting, because SCO has a large number of other countries, and with Pakistan being there, the danger of it getting embroiled into India-Pakistan bilateral issues, which most regional groupings where both the countries are present invariably happens, can be avoided with this sort of a trilateral meeting. What is even more important is, I think, from my point of view, Prime Minister's focus and some of the statements as far as what he has highlighted, some of the issues which India has been affected by, this volatility in the oil prices. I think since both Saudi Arabia, US and Russia were all present at this particular meeting, his statement that there should be less volatility as it affects especially the emerging economies was very, very significant. Another factor where I think India, Russia and China have come together is as far as multilateralism is considered, because this G20 summit was very, very significant, because for the first time, I think in G20 summit, this word was not used, that there's a danger of protectionism, because that indicated that tacit understanding that there are certain flaws with multilateralism. Multilateralism is actually, and of course, one of the big setbacks as far as this G20 summit is on the environmental front, where I think President Trump stood his ground and said he is not rejoining the Paris agreement. And I think so that's a very, very significant work. But I think India has propounded a number of issues, and I think where he said WTO needs to be reformed. We also, as I said, we have talked of IMF and issues concerning with that. And we have also said that last time the agenda that we had given for terrorism, counterterrorism, should also be done. We have also talked of FATF, Financial Action Task Force, should now look at these economic fugitives who should be there, and the process of repatriating them should be fast. There are 9 points which have come up where we have said that the best practices need to be shared, and there should be an immediate the gains that an economic fugitive has gained by this dubious means should also not be allowed to be taken away, should be actually repatriated, and that should be confiscated. Those issues have been done. So I think this G20 summit makes a new beginning. I think India's stature has been acknowledged at the global podium, or what should say, the global stage. And I think by 2022, when we actually host the thing, we would be, I think, a key member of this G20 grouping.
Absolutely. Talking about multilateralism and RIC and multilateralism, RIC has called for transforming multilateral institutions, is how they have put it really in their statement. Now, how important is transforming some of these institutions, do you think, Ambassador?
Very important. And you see, because this was a point that the Prime Minister has been making all the time, that we need to reform the international, even because the statement, the declaration that has come out, that has noted the situation on the international world trade, on the global trade scene. Particularly, I think it refers, without saying it in so many words, the US-China trade war. And the Prime Minister has always been saying that it does not help anyone to point fingers at the others. But what we need to see is how have these international organizations, the multilateral organizations, what are the lacunae, where have they failed? And the declaration also says that multilateralism has not been able to meet the expectations of the international community. And it has taken on board that we need to change it, we need to reform it. That is what the formulation that the Prime Minister has always been using, reformed multilateralism. And I think the G20 has taken this on board, and it is not only as far as WTO is concerned, it's also IMF, it is also FATF, it is also it is the United Nations, because the Prime Minister also in many of these meetings, particularly in the BRICS meeting also, he said that we need to have a reform of the United Nations, it's working, and also of the Security Councils, and it will be good if all the countries were to speak with one voice.
Right.
And this was accepted by all these countries. How it is taken forward, we'll have to see. But I feel that most of the agenda points that the Prime Minister had advanced, like Alok has said, in terms of dealing with the economic offenders, that has found mention in the declaration, not in such detail, meaning it could not have been expected that you make a proposition and then it is lock, stock and barrel it is taken, but it is mentioned there that for the next G20, it will be discussed in greater detail.
Right.
What the Prime Minister had proposed as far as counter-terrorism is concerned, the 11-point agenda which he had given at Hamburg, that has been incorporated in this. Reformed multilateralism has been incorporated. What he has spoken about digital technology, digitization, what he has spoken about fintech, what he has spoken about the future of work, what he has spoken about the food for future, gender empowerment, all these elements, because as we know, the Prime Minister was the one who was invited to deliver the keynote address in the first session, which was putting people first.
Putting people first, yeah.
So on that, he was the one who was the keynote speaker.
Right. And
all the points that he has made, they have found a way in the G20 declaration. So if we were to look at from India's perspective, both as far as G20 I think we have put a very significant footprint on that, a very significant mark on that. And if we look in terms of the bilaterals, you mentioned, we've discussed Jay, we've spoken about Rick. There are a whole host of other interactions that took place. I think India has been able to achieve what it had set out to when the Prime Minister went to participate in the meeting.
Absolutely. Alok Bansal, Ambassador Sajjanar was talking about India playing the balancing act really well at G20. Is this a positive shift in India's foreign policy that we are witnessing?
See, there is no doubt. I think under the current government, India has actually regained those salience as far as global stage is concerned. And I think what is great is that today virtually every major country in the world wants to have good relations with India. And I think the clearest manifestation of this was in the G20 summit, where you also had a RIC summit, where you had the three leaders, that is India, China and Russia together at the heads of government level. And then of course you also had Jai summit, where you had Japan, America and India. The only common country was India. So if you could be part of two contending, contrasting groupings, that shows how well balanced your foreign policy is. If you actually go back to European history and you see Charles Bismarck before First World War, the way he would balance, he was in a grouping with Austro-Hungarian Empire also, and as well as with the Russian Empire, so as to keep two contradictory, contrasting countries both as their allies. I think that's the high point of India's diplomacy. I think that we are able to do so. And I think in Hamburg, which was the previous one, I think Prime Minister Modi's 11-point agenda on terrorism was incorporated virtually entirely into the declaration, was also an indication. In fact, now Prime Minister Modi has asked that this should be implemented now, it should be taken to next level. That also shows that India's growing stature, that we have that confidence that where we are saying that these should be incorporated. The 9-point agenda may not have been totally incorporated, but it will be discussed. And it's a very, very significant factor, because this also allows him to take this point domestically, because as far as domestic audience is concerned, there have been a lot of talk about so many high profile economic offenders who have managed to get away. But what is important is that he said that there needs to be a commonality as far as repatriation of these offenders are concerned. Also the proceeds, the benefits that the people have acquired because of that should be frozen and should be repatriated back to the country. So I think whatever little crisis or whatever little concerns people in India had about certain high profile economic offenders who managed to get away in last few years, I think would be put to rest. The very fact that this has been discussed by G20, and probably next G20 summit, it will be discussed in greater detail.
Absolutely. Right. Ambassador, I told you I'd come back to you and get a reaction on, India hosting the G20 summit for the first time in 2022. Your thoughts on that?
I think it will not only be a G20 summit. I think it will be the congregation of the strongest and the most powerful and in terms of the economic strength, the biggest countries ever in India. So I think in that sense, the significance and relevance goes much beyond G20, because, in terms of numbers, of course, when we had the Africa Forum Summit in 2015, we had about 40 plus leaders from Africa and so on and so forth. All countries are important. I'm not denying, I'm not saying that one country is more important than the other. But if you were to look at the weight, economic strength, political power or clout, they had a certain weight. But these G20 countries, as was mentioned, 85 to 90% of world output, 80% of world trade, 2/3 of world population, more than half of world territorial area, they count for something. After all, if we look at the whole world, 193 countries, that means 173 countries out there account for barely about 10 to 15% of world output. So, getting all these countries or the leaders here, I think would be a huge achievement. It would be a great responsibility also that, we are inviting all of them. It should be done well, the message, and it would be, in a sense, more than a sense, coming of age as far as India is concerned. Of course, We see it is the fastest growing economy, 8%, 7.5%, whatever it is. But I think we really need to set our house in order in a variety of ways. You know, we talk about environment, we talk about climate change, and International Solar Alliance, that has been announced. But how we can sort of, walk the talk and prove to the world that we are doing what it needs, what it takes to emerge as a responsible and a strong member of the international community who can sit on the table to frame rules for the world in areas of trade, in areas of climate change,
right,
and in financial stability areas and others.
Absolutely. All right. With that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of India's World. Thank you to the both of you for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to hear from you as well. Do share your feedback with us. Our email ID is indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from me. See you again next time.